Hey, good morning. Welcome back to Breakfast at Fiji One. Hope you're having a beautiful Tuesday morning. Looking forward to the election that is happening tomorrow and also the festive season that we are walking into. Lots of interesting things that's happening here on a breakfast set. Lots of interesting people we've been talking to throughout last week and also this week. One of the people that I'm excited to interview today is Professor Dr. Peter Baofu. Now, he is an American visionary and author of 143 new theories and visions in 177 scholarly books as of October 2022, and numerous articles to provide a visionary challenge to conventional wisdom in all fields of knowledge, that is social science, the formal sciences, the natural sciences, and humanities, with the aim for unified theories of everything together with numerous visions of future histories in relation to the mind, nature, society, and culture. Welcome, Professor Dr. Peter. How are you?
I'm fine. Thank you for inviting me.
Sorry, just explain, how many times have you been in our country?
This is my first time.
Okay. So far, sorry, when did you arrive?
A few days ago.
Okay. How long are you going to be in this country?
Maybe about a few weeks.
A few weeks. Okay. Just in relation to everything that we've talked about and what I've mentioned in the intro, could you please explain the reason why you were in our country?
Well, to cut the story short, I have been engaging on a global tour to do my ethnographic research, not just for one country, one culture, one society, but the entire planet Earth. Okay. And that's why I have been in more than 125 countries by now. There's not many countries left for me to go to. And I do that because I want to understand humanity, not just one country, one culture, one people. And I want to provide some vision, some solution to global problems. And so far, I have proposed more than 145 different visions and new theories about the human future in all fields of knowledge in relation to the mind, culture, society, and nature. So that's exactly what I do. And Fiji is, of course, one of the countries that I cannot ignore.
Okay. So far that you've been in this country for, like you mentioned, just a couple of days, what have you seen in our country that is different from other countries that you visited?
There are a lot of things which are similar, but there are also a lot of things which are different. Let me give you some examples. Fiji, as you probably know, is probably one of the most advanced countries in this region.
I didn't know that.
Okay.
Wow.
Yeah, so I think that that's also one of the most developed in this region.
In this region?
Yes,
okay.
Regionally, not globally. So there are a lot of good things to talk about there, and that is one of them. There are also many other things, like Fiji is also well known for the beautiful nature and sceneries and all that, and that's why people come here. And the people are also very friendly, and there's another plus, that's why your economy is dependent on tourism.
Okay.
So there is a, excuse me, and so there is a major reason that a lot of people come, and that is one of the factors which make Fiji quite popular in that sense. So there are a lot of things which are quite positive over here. Then, of course, on the other hand, there are also some other issues which I think that maybe the country can pay more attention to, and maybe we can talk about that. I don't know your schedule, but maybe we can talk about some of the major concerns which require some solution.
Okay. All right then. Just in relation to everything that we have in our country, the resources that we have, if you've in your findings, what are the resources that we have in our country, and how do you think that we can best utilize it to move our country forward?
I think that there are several things which are very important to consider. Let's talk about the economic first, the issue. As you just mentioned about the resources, Fiji is dependent on tourism and also on export of labor. Let's say people going to work in Australia, New Zealand, and you also depend on tourism, people coming, the tourists coming over here. So a major portion of the economy is on this kind of dependency. That's good in a way because it provides certain revenues for the workers who work outside, and also for those people who are dependent on tourist business. Your question to us is, what do you go further? I think that to go further, you have to go beyond that dependency, because if you look into all economies of the world, many of those who are dependent on tourism and agriculture or export of cheap labor often do not go very far.
Wow.
Yes.
Is there a reason why this happens?
That's because once your economy is dependent on something, let's say, look, cheap labor, many of the workers going to Australia and New Zealand, they are not going to go there to work as CEOs or the president of some companies.
True.
And many of them are low-skilled, cheap laborers. In fact, I saw quite a number of them like that when I was in Australia. And I can see that many of the workers from the Pacific Islands, they go there, what do? They do that in agriculture, mining, or in tourism, or cleaning, or transportation, or working in cafe, or doing some basic services that many of the local privileged Australians do not like to do. So you get a wages which may be a bit higher than those over here, but in the end you are still at the lower end of the sector. So you cannot go very far in life and also in the economic development if many of your workers get stuck in that kind of low-end jobs. So for you to go further in development, you have to move beyond that sooner or later. If not, you get stuck on that. Tourism is also fine. Many countries also use tourism as one of the major sources of revenue. But again, your economy cannot go very far to be at the top. Look at all the most advanced countries on earth, and look at many of those who have the highest income per capita. Many of them are not dependent on tourism and agriculture.
Wow.
In fact, even for countries like, like UAE, they have a high income per capita, but even they are in the process of getting out of it. Oil, tourism, for example, now they are trying to diversify. Why? Because they know the oil is not going to last forever. And tourism can only get so far for the attraction. So even they now are trying to do something else to diversify into finance, banking, or many other things. So you ask me what can be done. I think that Fiji, yes, they have a very high income per capita in the local region. The last figure that I have read is probably $12,000 or something like that, more or less purchasing power parity. So that's good in a way, but you cannot go very far if you continue like that, because up to a certain point, you will get trapped in that kind of area. You cannot go very far. If you look in many of those countries, they are the most advanced, they are the most powerful, the most influential. Many of them are often the ones which are very good, let's say, in science and invention, innovation. Look at China. China is now becoming the top economic power on earth. But now they are also in the process of transitioning from very cheap export to more or less high-end, high-tech now. They are competing with the US in quantum computing, in telecommunication, in transportation. Now, even the US now is more and more concerned. And that's why now the US is more or less in a trade war with China, because it's afraid that China will take over. See, that is what makes China become such a major factor, not for everyone. So the same thing about Fiji, and also many of the islands that I have been in. Yes, you ask me how do you get out of it to make that even better. I think that you need to get out of that dependency.
Okay, so Professor, with everything that you've just mentioned, that's all we've known. We've known the only way that we can survive, especially in our country, is tourism, is one of the biggest one. And now that cheap labor has come in, sending our people overseas, we think that is some of the ways that we can tackle some of the problems that we have. What do you propose is the solution for this?
There are a lot of different solutions. I was also in Vanuatu and some of the countries too. I was also on TV, and they also asked me the same question. In some ways, many of the problems are very similar for underdevelopment. It's not just here, but also in Africa or in Asia or in Latin America. This kind of economies cannot take you very far. And how can you get out of that? I think that there are different levels of development that you can go into. The government, by the way, can help. Even though the government is not the only solution, you also need to have the local people. They can do something else too. The government has a role to play, but the people also have another role, another part to play. Education is one, for example. I think that is a very important one. Healthcare is also important, because if the people are not healthy, then it's difficult for you to work and all that. There are many other things. The political situation is also another one. The two are related. One of the major things that I learned, in fact, I experienced firsthand when I arrived at the airport, is that I was questioned by the police and the immigration officers about why do you come here, what are you doing here, and all that. I don't mind to answer, but I can see right away, because I have been in so many different countries, the political system is a bit more authoritarian. Okay, now that is a good point, but that's also a bad point. The good thing is that unlike Vanuatu, the political system in Fiji is much more effective, much more unified. The one in Vanuatu has a history of political instability. Wow. Okay, that's a good part of that. Now, the bad part of that is that I think that you need to improve to make that a bit less authoritarian. Okay. So it make it easier for people to live and to speak out, and also to invest and do business. I spoke to some people over here, and one of the things that they told me is that sometimes it's very difficult for them to do business here in Fiji because of the government regulation and control. And they think that if the government can a bit less authoritarian, less controlling, a bit more encouraging, things can get better for business. Now, that's a very important point for economic development, because that is a major concern about it. Now, there are many other issues, but I'll give you some chance to respond first. Sorry, I was just going to say, we're just going to go into a break now, and then when we come back, we can talk more about this, if that's okay. Okay, that's fine. Professor. Well, stay with us, we've got more for you straight after this break. Hey, good morning. Welcome back to Breakfast at Fiji One. We're still here with Professor Dr. Peter, who's been telling us how we can move our country forward. And it's quite interesting just listening to everything that you were saying, because some of the things that you're mentioning is something that we face every day, but we don't know that it has been an issue that we need to address. Now, you mentioned how we can move a country forward. Well, like you've already mentioned about how we can change the style of probably the way we do things. But what other things is the contributing factor for us to move forward? If you can mention some of them. So far, I just mentioned two of them. One is the political. The second one is the economic. The third one, that's also very important too for many countries. That's the cultural, the culture of a society. In the case of Fiji, I think that there are some very nice things to talk about the culture over here. People are very friendly and very hospitable. True. So that's important, especially for tourism, for example. The drawback is that I can also see that the process of influence from the outside, westernization, for example, and also the further development of a capitalistic mindset here is getting stronger and stronger.
Okay.
I can notice that because I have been so many places and that's my expertise. I can see that the mindset of the people over here become more and more business-like, capitalistic. That means that they are also getting further and further away from the traditional roots of Fiji. Now, let me give you some concrete example to back it up. I can see that more and more people here that start smoking on the street. Now, some of them take some drugs too, by the way, but in a very secretive way, so that the police cannot arrest them. I spoke to some of them too. I'm also doing some research about this. I know that in many traditional cultures, not just in Fiji, not just in this region, but also in many other countries, in Africa, in Asia, in Latin America, and all that. In their tradition, they often did not do that, but now they do. That means that the more you develop, the more you are learning from others, and you are copying the mindset, the habits.
True.
So the more the tourists come in, you look up to them because they have money. So they dress like this, you dress like that too. They smoke, you learn to smoke too. They drink, you learn to drink too. So many other things and crimes, I can notice that are also becoming a major issue. The way that people talk. Let me give you one example. I was walking down the street the other day, and a guy approached me. It was in the evening. He asked me in a very aggressive way, to the point that I was thinking, should I start to defend myself or not? He said, hey, give me $5. I want to eat now. When you ask someone to give you something, it's a common sense. I try to be nice because you ask someone to give you something. But the way that he talked, I can see certain kind of manners, which I see a lot in New York. I saw this a lot in London, even in Shanghai nowadays.
Wow.
So this is quite international. The more you become developed, become capitalistic and business-like, people, the manners become more and more, they are less polite. The traditional way of talking, the politeness, the warmness is gone.
Wow.
Now everything is about money. You think about you only. And they will talk. Now, you go to the fresh market, some of them talk like that, but on the other hand, normal people, they also have the traditional root. When they talk to you, they can be very nice, very compassionate, very polite. So that's good. But part of that is gradually loosening up. You understand me?
Yes.
So I think that I also spoke to some people about that, and they told me that that's also one of the major concerns now. The traditional roots of Fiji are declining over time. So if you want to become a Fijian, I think that it's time for you to look into the traditional culture. How far do you want to lose in order to be more developed in that capitalistic Western way?
I love how you mentioned that, because just everything that you just mentioned, it just made me think, like, is the solution, do we let go of the capitalism mentality, or do we just embrace it and then look back and then try and find a way that we can merge our tradition and our capitalism mentality together? Is there a way that we can do this?
Yeah, you said that if you go to the villages, small villages, not in the capital, people speak in a nicer way, because the development there is much more isolated. People still behave in a traditional way. But when you go into that, and all of a sudden you are exposed to this kind of way of doing things. So that is an example of what I want to talk about, the large issue of cultural development too. So I think that, but then there is another related issue is also important for Fiji and the local region is the question of external control and domination.
Okay.
For example, in the case of Fiji, and also in the local region now, there is a rivalry between China and the U.S. Fiji, in this case, has also a colonial history.
True.
And I can see that over here, you have a lot of English influence, and in all aspects. And not only that, your economy in many ways is also dependent now on Australia, New Zealand, and all that. Those are the regional power, and you. So this kind of influence is also a question for people to think about. And there's question number 4 now, or issue number 4. That's the international politics, which is affecting the local region.
Sorry, sir. I think time has caught up with us. Just your last message, because I know that you mentioned that the government has to play its part and the ministry has to play its part, but the people also have their different roles that they need to play in order to move our country forward. Now, for the people that's watching at home and who's very interested in, I am interested in everything that you are saying, but also if they are going to do their part, what could be your message to them in them playing the role for us to all collectively move the country forward?
That's also a very good point too. The government can be a bit more educated in relation to this issue and send some messages to the local people, and the local people can also work together with the government. In some other countries, in some more collective country, people tend to work together with the government. In Japan, for example, in South Korea, in China, people are much more collectivist. So when the government has a message, the people tend to work together with the government to finish that goal, whatever that is. So that makes them, in a way, much more developed, because that's very important for development. In the case of Fiji, I think that maybe the local people can be a bit more aware of this problem, so the government and the people can work together and say, this is something that we need to confront, we need to address. In the case of my last issue is that I'm quite aware of the non-alignment, the kind of foreign policy which is not trying to be neutral to all major powers and trying to be friendly to all. I do think that is a good start, but you'll be experiencing a lot of pressure. Look at how Solomon Islands have been experiencing after they decided to sign a security pact with China. And Fiji is no exception either. And Vanuatu is also no exception. And many of them will face the same pressure. So that is another external issue that you have to, the government and the people can work together and confront it, because sooner or later it will come and affect you in a way that you will wake up and see that no, that's not quite what we want to do.
Well, we don't want that to happen, sir.
Yeah.
Well, thank you very much for your time. Hopefully we can have more time like this where you can talk a little bit more about this in detail. There's so many questions that I would like to ask you, but I'm afraid that we've caught up, that time has really caught up with us, and we would wish you all the best in the rest of your stay here in Fiji and also your trip back to whatever nation you're going to go and work at. Vinau valeu for your time.
So thank you for having me.
Professor Dr. Peter Baofu, who's been a blessing to us and also just telling us what we need to do to move our country forward. Stay with us, we've got more for you straight after this break.